My, my name is Shanice Brittany Clark. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at PPS, and am looking forward to hearing what y'all have to share and bring perspectives as we kind of think about what this package should look like coming in November. So we've got a few folks with us. Megan is helping out. This breakout room is being recorded, so I also wanted to let folks know before we got rolling in the discussion. And we'll also be taking some notes. And so we might also have board member Director Lowry here with us. And I'd love to create some space for you to give an introduction, and then for each of us to give introduction and maybe the name of the school that you might be associated with. And maybe we can start with
Hi, my name's Rashmi. I wasn't sure if you wanted us to jump in, so I just have problems with awkward silences, so I just start talking. Okay, great. I'm a parent, and the school that my child will be affiliated with is our Hosford in Cleveland. I've lived in all different neighborhoods throughout Portland, but we're currently in the Southeast. I also enjoyed sitting in on the PPS campus master plan conversation for Cleveland recently, which was a really great learning experience. So I appreciate having that perspective. And I didn't know really what to expect in these conversations, so I was kind of partially coming here to hear what people had to say. So hoping to learn as well as participate. Thank you.
Well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Patrick Labov, and I'm the Director of Projects and Construction and Facilities. So my background's in construction. That's really what we focus on in projects and construction. And I've been with PPS for 10 years. Started as a project manager in facilities, jumped over the bond and managed the Roosevelt modernization project for a little bit, and then took this position a couple years ago. So I'm happy to be here, and I'll try to answer questions related to the type of projects that we'd be looking at for this bond, and any other questions that you might have. I'll try.
Alicia, how can you introduce yourself next?
I'm Alicia Smith, and I work at Irvington School, and I am the school secretary.
I can go next. I'm Claire Chumley-Fisher. I'm a student at Cleveland High School, and I'm going to be a junior next year.
I'm Ailey Lowry, and I have a daughter who's going to be a sophomore next year at Cleveland, and I also serve on the school board as a board director.
Thaddeus, I think you were muted before.
Oh, I was muted while I was talking about something else to somebody.
Oh, okay.
But I'll go. My name's Thaddeus Knight. I'm approaching my third year as the head cross country and distance track coach at Jefferson High School. Go Demos.
How do you like that track, Thaddeus?
Well, when they finish it, it'll be great.
Okay. What do they need to do to it?
Well, the pole vault is not the bolt holes for the stanchions aren't in place, and there are no markings for the 3K or the 1500. I'm
Other
sure
than that,
there's
other
also
than that, is the track nice?
The surface is okay. It's better than Lincoln's was, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say it doesn't need some attention. I know that there's a root coming up in one corner underneath the track that will be an increasing problem. Having run on it, it's okay. I mean, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's state of the art or anything, but it could be a lot worse.
Yeah, we replaced it, I think, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
I remember that. It was absolutely horrible then. So
yeah,
definitely an improvement. But yeah,
agreed.
Just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I know we will have a series of breakout groups tonight, and for a period of this time, just want to give you all the space to provide feedback and thoughts. And I'm going to share my screen in a moment. There is a quick handout that gives you an overview of what kind of investments could look like in terms of our health and safety in targeted areas. I know we potentially have someone who just joined us, Lakeisha. We just went around and did introductions, and if you wouldn't mind, it would be great if you also introduced yourself, and then we could kind of just roll right into taking a look at that one pager and hearing your feedback.
Hi, everybody. My name's Lakeisha. I work for Self Enhancement. I'm just here to listen and see what's going on and what kind of input I can give to you guys.
Wonderful, folks. So I'm going to present now. I'm going to present a tab. And so hopefully you all can see my screen. I can't see you at this point, but I wanted to ask you what your reactions basically are to what you're looking at, and I'm going to tell you what that is. I think we've got 3 options that we are really curious about how they resonate and how they meet the needs of students and folks who you support and who are in your communities. And so the second and third options for health and safety that are kind of being presented tonight are similar. So I want to talk to you about the first one at the start of our conversation and get your reactions. But essentially, the main areas of all of these investments will be roofs, seismic improvements, mechanical systems, kind of those things that Danny and Chief Young were describing in our previous presentation. But in this first scenario, you will see that there is about $53 million in investments to support roofs. And a large number, 45 million, to repair mechanical systems. And these numbers that you'll see bottom left are also going towards things like classroom door locks and retrofitting. And really supporting the roof and infrastructure of our buildings. So now I'll pause. I want to make sure that you all have the time to share your feedback and just first get your reactions and how they might impact you or your student, especially if you might be in a scenario that may need some improvements. And so I'll name that the temperatures of our buildings might be things that are greatly impacted by these kinds of improvements. And so if you're feeling an extreme temperature, for example, in school or in your classroom, that this would probably be something that would largely impact the ways in which you experience that environment. So I'll pause. What are your reactions?
I'm curious, what are the primary concerns about the roofs? Are they do they need to be updated to meet code? Is it part of a traditional cycle of improvement that it's time to look at the roof sort of thing? What's motivating us to take a look at that?
So Thaddeus, great question. It's more towards your second comment. We need to keep renewing our roofs. They have about a 20-year to 25-year lifespan. And we've got 100 buildings, actually 250 buildings, 100 sites. So it's just a continual process to keep up with the deteriorating roofs. We hired a facility condition assessment firm to go assess all of the roofs in the district, which they completed their work 3 or 4 months ago. And they helped prioritize for us which roofs are nearing the end of their life cycle. And so, but when we do a roof replacement, it's not only the roof that we touch the mechanical equipment on top of the roof, the curbs, the skylights. If there's any unreinforced masonry like parapet walls, we're going to reinforce those. If it doesn't have a plywood seismic structural diaphragm on the roof, we'll add that, typically a new plywood layer, to provide strength and stability for the building during a seismic event. So it's a whole lot that go into these roof replacements, which is great. It's a great time to do all this work.
Which do you have off the top of your head which roofs are most in need or closest to the end of their life cycle?
It looks like the FCA ranked Dunaway, Rice, Richmond as kind of the worst, but not far behind that are 22 other roofs. I mean, so there's like 25 roofs that need attention. Of course, we can't fit all 25 into this bond, but we'll fit what we think are the worst out of those. So,
not the high schools are the only schools to be considered, but within the high schools, is there a school or 2 or 3 that stand out?
Not including the high schools?
But just within the category of the high schools.
Oh, well, Cleveland. I mean, it did get a lot of roofing work a while back, but it's still got issues. We don't, as part of this roofing number you see in the bond documents, that doesn't include any high schools, because the high schools are going to get the modernization work, which when you do a modernization, you just replace the entire roof. I mean,
okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is Alicia, and I'm at Irvington School, and I'm just curious about where we are on the list, because it seems like every time we have a hard rain, it rains in our gym, which then can ruin the floor. And then the kids, if they can't go outside, they don't have a place to play. So I'm just kind
Absolutely.
of curious about where Irvington is on that list.
Let me just look and see if I can pull that up.
Thank you, Patrick, for taking a look at that and providing some insight too on how high schools might be impacted versus the rest of our folks with this particular investment. And I'll pause. Did you find it?
Oh, sorry, I found it. Yeah, it's included in that, say, 25 roof category, and then the next phase is to winnow that down to see what we want to tackle. If this bond passes, then would that be one of the ones that makes the final cut, if you will? So, but it's one of the highest priority.
What do we do in the meantime?
Well, in the meantime, you're talking to the right person. If you've got a roof leak, the process is to submit basically a work order
With the custodian?
You can either do it that way. That's the traditional way to submit a work order. That goes into our maintenance department. I'm in the projects department. That goes to maintenance. It's separate. And then if they can't handle it with our one roofer for 250 buildings, which is kind of ridiculous.
We have one roofer?
We have one, maybe two full-time people to patch roofs, which,
Wow.
Then it comes over to my group and we contract out the repair. So it's up to us to get a hold of a contractor, go out and evaluate it, get a contract and repair that roof. That's how it should work. And you can talk with your principal and you can ask your principal to submit a PDR, and that comes right to our group. And then we get back with your principal or whoever submits the PDR and we follow up from there. But that's great. I'm going to put it on my list of Irvington Jim right now. So at least I have it. It's good info to have, and maybe we can take care of this ASAP before the rain starts.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but how long would that process take to go through that chain?
So if the principal submits a PDR, our time frame is to get back with a decision within 7 business days. If it becomes a project, it sounds like if it's a roof leak, it automatically goes to the top of the list along with heating issues. So then it's a question of getting a contractor out to give us a cost proposal and then getting a contract issued to start the work. And so it could be a month before we get the contractor out to do the work, or it could be a little longer depending on the contractors available.
Okay.
So that's for repair type work. Not a complete roof replacement.
Right. Were you suggesting that there might be some alternate route?
Yeah. So for issues with the building, the kind of traditional path is to go through the custodian. The custodian will go into the work order system and submit a work order, and that will go to our maintenance department. They will evaluate it, and if it's too large of a project for them to get to, or they don't have the capacity or whatever, then typically they get a hold of our department and say, hey, we can't handle this. It's too big for our internal working staff. Can you guys take this? And then it comes to us.
I see. All right.
Yeah. The other path that I just explained is to submit what we call a project development request form to our group. And we've tried to inform all the principals. Some are new that that's another avenue for, call it larger projects. If a school wants to tackle, say they have a PTA group or community group that wants to install a garden or fundraise for another type of project at the school, that's kind of the path for those sorts of things. I think, I don't know why I'm thinking of the Cleveland project, but we met with the principal recently about adding some security cameras, and there's a group that wanted to raise some funds for security cameras for Cleveland. That was a PDR process that came into our group. Yeah, I'll stop talking. I feel like I'm just
yeah, and I don't want to talk too much if somebody else wants to jump in. Patrick, is there an opportunity to talk to you further about? I've got a space at Jefferson that we've been talking about, and maybe you could give me some insight. I mean, if this is the forum to do that, then I'll do it. But if maybe we want to give some other folks a chance to talk to him.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can put in a link in the chat, which is our PDR form that you use to fill out.
Okay.
Put it in the chat.
Okay.
Would you also put your email in the chat, Patrick, so that folks like Thaddeus can follow up with you? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. And so we have about 9 more minutes before we transition to the second breakout group, and want to just make sure, especially for folks as we're thinking about health and safety in these ways and these kinds of replacements, do those kind of make sense and or align with what you need? And I know we have some other folks, Clara, Lakeisha, and Rashmi, who just want to hold some space in case there's something lingering or that you want to lift up.
Hi, this is Rashmi. Thanks for the opportunity. I was wondering how the amounts for the different buckets have been established, and I guess I was asking because I know seismic retrofits are a huge concern since we've been identified as being in a high seismic zone and prone to a very major earthquake, and many of our buildings are unreinforced masonry, and that number seems very small in comparison with some of the other budget numbers. I thought I saw like 15 million or something. And I know that that's partially probably a topic for the full modernization, because I know it's hard to just come in and do a little bit of seismic work, but I guess I was wondering how that kind of seems to fall lower on the list. That's all.
That's good feedback. I know for each of the bond options, you'll see that at least that same level generally. I know a goal was to maintain the same renewal rate, to not increase that tax rate. And potentially there's some more context that Patrick might be able to share on what that might look like for, being a conservative number for those kinds of repairs. But ultimately, this is some good feedback to understand that we might need to rethink and or, are being asked to do that.
I'm also really concerned about the seismic work. I saw the 2019 summary had said that most of the seismic work has been done. Not all of it has been, mostly roofs or really minor work. And I'm concerned because I know it often ranks lower because there's more pressing work like leaking roofs. But I'm wondering, what are the barriers that you face to getting the kind of funding that would get the full seismic safety for the brick schools?
Great questions. Seismic is a hot topic, a sticky issue. It's complicated. It's very expensive. So I'll speak to what the number. I think we've got 15 million right now targeted, which is low. And the thought being for the 15 million was, let's get the biggest bang for our buck. And so we tried to target schools that needed their roof replaced and also were on the Portland, the city the Bureau of Development Services, I believe, the unreinforced masonry list. The city has a list of buildings in Portland proper that have what they've identified as unreinforced masonry. So we wanted to target schools that are on that list and also are scheduled to get a roof replacement. And so we came up with just a few schools. It's not very many. I think it's 3 to 4 for 15 million, which is partial seismic improvements, not a full. And so I think some of the barriers for full seismic improvements are A, cost. B, if you do a full seismic retrofit on a school and bring it up to immediate occupancy, so after a big quake, it's immediately available for people to go into and use, you're going to have to shut that school down for 6, 8 to 12 months to do the construction work. So it's a major impact to operations of a school. And we don't have a lot of swing site schools where we could just move kids over and staff over to hold school while we do work at this building. And then I think it's cost and complexity and the overall impact to a school. I think those are the major barriers right
Patrick, this is Ailey Lowry. I'm on the school board, and I know one of the things we on the board have talked about is that, you know, long term we want to modernize all of our school buildings.
Yeah.
So it's sort of weighing. I think this goes to the question from the Cleveland student. Sorry, I don't remember your first name. And that, you know, how much if it's going to cause us to shut down a school and do all this complex work just for seismic, and that's not modernizing the building in any other way. Maybe doing a roof. You know, is it worth it? What stopgap things can we do so that we can buy some time in that building and then down the road modernize it? So it's always that tension. I think with safety, we know we're going to update all of our buildings. You know, if roofs are failing, if, you know, things are not safe, how do we get those up to a safe standard so that they last us long enough to get to the next modernization level? High schools first, middle schools, and then elementary schools is the long-term plan. But with, you know, 100 sites, it's just going to take us a long time to work through that list.
Thank you, Director Lowry. I want to also add that since we started the bond in 2012, on any roof that got replaced, we did roof level seismic improvements, which is big. It improves the diaphragm of the building. And so it does provide some stability. So that it's good, it's not great, but it's an improvement. And we've replaced a whole bunch of our roofs and done those roof level seismic work on a bunch of our buildings. So it's an improvement, but we can definitely do a lot more. So.
Guess for me, the walls of the unreinforced masonry building, that's still the most concerning, because looking at a magnitude 8 or greater earthquake, it seems far off in the future, but it could happen in 100 years or tomorrow. And so if a school collapsed like happened in Mexico in 2017, well, they lost a lot of students' lives. So I'm really worried about that, having multiple PPS school buildings that thousands of kids go into every day, and then the possibility of that collapsing in an earthquake, including Cleveland, then that's really concerning.
Patrick, do we have a number on, I know, like, you know, Llewellyn got a seismic update because it was on it would be a pile of rubble list. Do we have a list of schools, you know, that, like, I know we upgraded Llewellyn so that it was survivable, like you could run out, but it wouldn't be able to be, you know, as to Kiara's point, what is our list right now of schools we think would be able to be evacuated, and do we have a list of schools that we think would be a pile of rubble? And is that how we decide what gets seismic upgrades?
I knew we do have a list of schools that we've made seismic improvements on over the years, and a list that has ranked the schools from, let's call it best to worst, if you will. I don't know if we have a list of schools that you know, qualify as can be evacuated, but Let me see what I can pull up. I'd be happy to send it to you, what I can find after the meetings. For sure.
When I think we talk about seismic, it's a range.
It is. Yep.
And we've got Megan taking notes of what folks shared, and this was recorded, so we definitely want to make note of everything that was surfaced here tonight, and make sure we kind of respond to that moving forward. So I think we're kind of in transition time now. What I'm going to do is temporarily share my screen, and so you get a chance to see a link once again if you need to transition to another breakout room. And we're going to give folks 1 to 2 minutes to kind of make this transition happening. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your feedback and perspectives and suggestions on what investment should look like for health and safety. And we will continue to engage with folks throughout this evening for a couple more sessions.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So I know a couple of folks were trickling in as we were finishing up. We'll probably wait a minute or two to see if we have any folks who come along and just get the discussion right on. I think we can go ahead and get started. I'm not feeling a lot of movement in and out of the room. So welcome, folks. My name is Shanice Clark, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at PPS. I think we've got about 12 of us here. I know there are a few PPS staff with us who are on the line, and also Megan is helping out with taking notes for us, and this is being recorded. So I wanted to let you all know before we got started with our discussion. But I want to give you all just the most space to share your feedback and thoughts and questions, and we'll try our best to make sure we create some space for everyone who has a reaction to give to us. And so what we will probably do initially is I'm going to share my screen with you, and so you can get a visual of kind of what I'm about to share. So let me present my screen. So we're presenting. And so this is the breakout room for health and safety. So hopefully this is what you wanted to talk about. But what you kind of heard in the initial presentation was kind of these areas of roof, mechanical, security, seismic improvements, ADA accessibility. Those are the kinds of things that we're kind of grappling with for health and safety, or proposed investments. So we want to hear what you think about that. What I will say across the few options that you're kind of hearing about tonight, that the second and third one for health and safety are quite similar. So what you're seeing here on my screen is the first option, which has roofing repairs and replacements at a level of 53 million, and that mechanical at 45 million, which might be that largest distinction between the other options. And so I'll scroll down.
Hey, Shanice, I think your screen is showing the wrong one. It's just the breakout rooms. So you might need to change it to the actual presentation.
Gotcha. So I'm going to move my tab. Thank you, Megan, for letting me know that I've been sharing the wrong tab. So we're gonna try that once again. Now, are you all seeing a screen with a lot of words? On the bottom left, it should say proposed health and safety investments. Do you see that?
Yes, thank you, Shanice.
Beautiful, beautiful. So essentially what I said is what is on this page. You have 53 million allocated for repairing and replacing roofs, 45 million allocated, proposed for repairing or replacing those mechanical systems, those things that keep that manage the temperatures, right, in our buildings. And we want to hear your reactions. Below, you'll see a few more items listed here that are allocated for security, seismic improvements, retrofitting some of our smallest schools, and thinking about removing barriers that will make our schools just more accessible. Scrolling to the next bond option, you'll see these amounts that I talked about initially be a little bit higher, at 71 million for roofs and 75 million for mechanical systems. But these other levels are similar. And so I'll let you sit with that and just want to hear your reactions. Are these the kinds of things that make sense for you, and what might be a priority? And also, I'll pause here and let you take a look at the screen. I'll scroll up to this little table here. On your right, you'll see our health and safety projects, and in a condensed version, if that might be a better glance to take a look at these bond options and the levels in which they'll impact health and safety. And so, just generally, what reactions might be, especially thinking about the kinds of conditions that your classrooms or school buildings might have, and how a health and safety investment might might support that environment.
Hi, Shanice. This is Mike Rosen. I don't have a question, but I have a comment. So it looks like in all the options, ADA accessibility is funded at $11 million. And I've read in some of the supporting material that the estimate for the total cost to upgrade the district is $100 million for all the ADA improvements that are needed. And so my comment is I think we can invest more now in the bond and ADA improvements and make a more significant dent than just 10% of the work. And so when I look at the options, I'd like to see some of the money moved around into ADA accessibility. So thank you.
Hi, Shanice. This is Liz Folder-Branch. I'm a retired teacher from Portland Public Schools, and I would agree with Mike Rosen. I would like to see increases into making schools more accessible for students with alternative abilities in terms of travel, being able to access classrooms, widening doors. There's a lot of, I know I haven't been in the district in a while, but many of the schools have not been upgraded since I don't even know when in terms of that and what the real needs are for the students in. So I would just like to see a better investment or at least a consideration of moving some of those dollars around. And I was kind of looking at like where you could move it from the stack that you have now, the budgets that you have now. And I think it can be moved around from a little bit from mechanical and also from security. So that's just my input.
Jason Landrum.
Patrick, I'm not sure if you saw in the chat, Gabrielle put a comment about under this option, does this exclude Jefferson High School and remaining schools from rebuild and or modernization? Could you speak to that, Patrick?
Yes. Does it excluding the ADA? Are we talking about the ADA scope of work or the health and safety in general? Typically, if we do a modernization project, we're going to touch everything. So it's going to be completely upgraded ADA-wise, health and safety-wise. It's going to be upgraded to code. I mean, that's the general rule of thumb. So Jefferson High School modernization estimate should include all of those things in it on its own. So it shouldn't. Nothing in this health and safety portion should be Jefferson related. I hope that answers the question.
Lauren Lewis.
I guess I may have an extension to Gabriel's question. Good question, Gabriel. In terms of, like you were saying, with the modernization, that's another reason why I think some of it can shift more dollars into ADA at this point from the bond itself to just make those enhancements or those improvements even more, or to be able to make even more improvements, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance that I know everyone tries to strike with the modernization and then all the other needs that we have in our buildings. But yeah.
And then my question to you too, Patrick, is won't the security and all that with the modernization also be improved?
Yeah, so if Jefferson was modernized, the security portion, everything would be, all the health and safety categories would be brought up to current code and fully modernized. So security, roof, mechanical system, brand new, everything's ready to go.
So can I ask a question for clarification? So when we talk about the ADA, I'll make it I'll make it specific to my family. So having a brother that's been in a wheelchair since birth, he cannot access Jefferson High School through a main entrance to see my kids perform in anything. So when we talk about the ADA, is this a separate, is this an add-on? Like, is it, you have that door over there? What is it? I need a little bit of help visualizing what that means. And I agree with what Liz was saying, that we really need to think about, and Mike, about how much we're going to put into this and ensuring that we're not othering individuals and how we do this modernization. And that because Jefferson is one of the high schools identified as needing to be rebuilt at some point, that we're not putting money into something that we will then redo when that bond is passed for the rebuild.
Mm-hmm. John, do you want to talk a little bit about ADA scope?
Absolutely. So the $11 million that you see there currently includes Jefferson. If we move forward with the Jefferson modernization, that money would be reallocated to other ADA needs. So that's one important point that we need to be clear about. Jefferson architecturally is a mess. We have about $3 million in ADA improvements at that school. So I definitely hear you. I understand your frustration. Shanice and I are working really hard right now on the district's ADA transition plan, and we're targeting at least a saliency in universal design. So oftentimes you'll see the accessible entrance moved around to the side where the service entrance is. We can't continue to do that. We need to support our main entrances, get our kids into the kind of urban drama of entering and exiting the schools for accessibility. So I'll just say we're really working hard to support those needs.
And I'll also comment, I know I'll definitely take note for folks in this breakout room. There will be opportunities for input, especially for the ADA transition plan in particular. And so not only this space can inform those kinds of decisions, and but it's really good to know that's something that y'all are raising as a priority.
All right, we have another question from Paul. He said health and safety includes mental, physical, and medical health. Is there money allocated to expanding clinics in schools and mental health services?
That's a good question. I think as we look at the different bond options, there are some educational investments, health and safety, and modernization. And I think what you'll see, especially with the Benson campus, that there will be kind of this proposed model where we'll meet the diverse and specific needs of students, and have specified services that are really wraparound. But in terms of, what this can really look like, especially as we're thinking about special education investments, and investing in the social and emotional kind of an instructional core in those educational investments. Those might be some spaces where I'd see those called out, and absolutely, if there's some feedback and or things that might resonate for you as you think about your experience or your students, we definitely are wanting to engage and learn what that could look like as we sit with these options.
I have a lot of questions for this area. Sorry. when we were talking about those wraparound services, is that going to be also a consideration for culturally specific, or is this not the place to talk about that? We're more talking about space and safety, or just having access to space, or are we talking about what type of services we're looking to have?
Well, I would say it's kind of a both and what we are also doing is having conversations or focus groups that will absolutely inform services that impact our Black students and our Native students. And so I think I definitely would be more than willing to follow up and share those specific opportunities that are happening in the next couple of weeks. But yes, I think there's space to have that conversation, and it's absolutely important. And thinking about our vision and how we are building these environments that serve our students' needs, especially now when we're coming into this bond referral in November. We want to hear from folks, our Black and Indigenous families and folks of color, especially today and as we continue along in the process. And so, yes, there is about 9 minutes left in the focus group. I know there might be a couple of folks who haven't shared, but really generally what might be sitting with folks after hearing what we've discussed, or anything that you might not have gotten a chance to share yet. Want to hold space for that before we wrap up. Also, I want to say our superintendent has joined the session, and don't know, especially after you're hearing from some folks and what they might say are important as we're talking about the bond. What you might share after hearing some of our comments tonight.
So I have another question in terms of the outreach. I understand from the last session, breakout session, that the board is going to make a decision on which of these options is what will be on the November bond sometime in July. And I have several questions. One is, how are you collecting the data on who is responding to the survey and who's represented in that survey, and whose voices are missing? I just want to make sure we're looking at this and collecting voices that are important in this process, both from our student perspective and from our students that experience differences and our families.
Thank you for that question. I know our survey, something that we are looking at is by race and other identities of folks who are responding, and have gotten about, I think, 900 or so responses. But I think we do acknowledge as we're transitioning, especially into a next phase of serving our students, we think the decision-making processes and the ways in which they're designed might need additional avenues and space to engage with our Spanish-speaking families and our Black, Native, and students of color and Indigenous families and Black elders. So those are the kinds of focus groups that we'll be having in the next couple of weeks, in addition to reaching our community partners who are working with the schools that we've talked about, in addition to the neighborhoods that they reside around. And so those might be some other pathways that we are taking, in addition to breaking up maybe the survey data by identity, and thinking about our racial equity and social justice values and commitments through this process, I think might look like trying to engage with folks directly in multiple ways. But absolutely, I think your feedback on how we can kind of grow and collectively in doing that better, I think is part of the work too.
Are there efforts being made to make sure that we're receiving feedback from specific communities within our community? For example, I'm on the PTSA at Jefferson. My kids attend Jefferson. I'm also a former student, and I'm just wanting to make sure that, because we're in a pandemic, these are very strange times. I get that. So there's a lot of challenges, but I want to make sure people are given an opportunity for their voice to be heard, and how that's going to be done by this July board meeting is really important.
Absolutely. I think a couple of ways that might look are reaching groups at our schools, our principals and partners that might support the schools directly and indirectly. And so if we have an opportunity, especially with you all, to share those opportunities. And I saw the question in the chat here around a focus group for the ADA community, and yes. And so those are in the process of kind of being confirmed. And so we expect in the next couple of weeks for those to take place before the next board work session. And we'll be absolutely able to share with this group of you all the dates and opportunities for you all to share with other students or folks, or join and participate yourself. We have a few more minutes. I know there's a couple questions about share. There are good questions. So I want to make sure we talked a little bit about what we're working through, and also can continue to do that outreach.
This is Paul. I thought you had mentioned that the superintendent joined us. Is that the case in this breakout? If so, I just wanted to say, please really look at the expanding CTE with this bond. If you have to build out space or expand curriculum, hands-on learning is proven to be a way that engages students, and you can increase graduation rates. People will be more inclined to come to school and stay. With Portland Public Schools adopting the C2P2 framework for the projects, which is an initiative to afford more opportunities for women and people of color. We need those opportunities also for the students, so that when they graduate, they have a basic level of knowledge for those careers, and they can jump in and be very successful. So I just wanted to say that before we're done.
I'll offer a really quick response. Appreciate the plug for CTE. You don't have to convince this administration or board that is invaluable, that we offer as pathway options for our students. For those that have been following, our high school success plan included an inventory of our CTE pathways, and we noticed that there were a lot of holes in there. Not all comprehensive high schools had access to the same array of pathways. So we've really been making incremental and steady improvements there, so that no matter what high school you go to, you do have CTE pathways built out as choices to you. In the same way that we're championing completing arts pathways, which we're doing in the Jefferson cluster for the first time. So appreciate sort of the making sure that as we contemplate a bond, that the ed specs, which they do exist, include enough facility support for those CTE programs to be housed.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Me being a representative for the Carpenters Union, I know that many schools in PPS have adopted our Career Connections program, and if you ever need anything as far as helping getting more schools with that curriculum, I will gladly share my contact information. Thank you.
Please stay connected with Dr. Aurora Wood-Heimel, who leads our CTE programming. I'm sure she will appreciate that partnership.
Just looking at time, I think we're right at 7:30. I appreciate you all and sharing your feedback and perspectives. And we have taken notes of everything that you shared with us tonight. And so what I'm going to do now is make sure you have the link to make your next move and present my screen. I know folks have already joined us who are here for the third breakout session, but we'll give probably a good 30 seconds, 31, 32-ish for folks to come and go. I'm not feeling a ton of movement, so I think we can just go ahead and hop right in. I am going to change the tab I'm sharing. I'm learning a lot tonight about sharing tabs. My name is Shanice Clark, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement. I'm going to walk you quickly through what you might be getting to look at tonight for health and safety proposed investments. And I want to make sure that you all have the space to give feedback and reactions for our final 30 minutes as we wrap up the night this evening. So thank you for riding it all the way out. We are looking at a health and safety investments, and on the bottom left of my screen, you'll see some bullet points, but on the right side, there are highlights. So whatever works for you. But 53 million essentially are the allocated amount for roofs, those repairs or replacements at up to 9 sites. And as we're processing in some of our previous focus groups, that when a high school is modernized, that a lot of these health and safety investments are a part of that package. So just sit in with that, as we continue. 45 million in the first bond option is also going to impact repairs or replacements to mechanical systems, and those levels below. I'll just highlight here on my screen. You'll see these allocated levels for security, seismic, and ADA accessibility. And so those might look like locks to your classrooms. They might look like retrofitting our small schools, or thinking about making classrooms and buildings more accessible to students with different abilities. And so I'll say really quickly before we get into discussion to hear your reactions about this, The second and third options for health and safety are similar. They are allocated at this level of 71 million for roof, those roof repairs or replacements, and 75 million for mechanical system replacements. And so you'll notice this table here and those levels below are similar to the ones we just looked at. So thinking about your schools, your classrooms, do these kinds of investments make sense for you, and what might be a priority? We can pause now and just jump right in for discussion.
And I put this in the chat, and Shanice, I know you've said this in all the other meetings, so I'm just going to repeat this, that I know we've all known all these meetings have been recorded, but just another reminder that this is being recorded.
Thank you, Megan, for reminding us that this is being recorded before we got started. And also, we have some experts in the room. We've got our board members, our superintendent, and folks who are specializing in some of this work for our schools and special education and overall building modernization. So ask away, share your thoughts. What do you need?
Don't be shy,
Hi,
folks.
Hi, Scott.
Hi.
So I just came from the meeting before. I'm Noelle Fisk. I am a parent of 4, and my oldest daughter experiences a significant disability. And then I also work for PPS as a special education engagement coordinator, as well as a special education advocate. So I kind of wear 2 hats when I come to these meetings. So my comment would be on the ADA piece. Is that the right spot we're in for this one? The option for the bond funding to remove barriers and make 1 K-5, 1 middle school, and 1 high school per district fully accessible. Is that accurate?
That's right.
Okay, so I think that when I was responding earlier to the options within the educational investment, it was talking about updating 82 classrooms. I'm someone who believes in inclusion, and I also believe that students need different things. So when I talk about inclusive practices, it is definitely that students with disabilities need to be accessing general education to the maximum extent appropriate, which is, of course, their right per law. But when you look at that within our buildings, and I don't believe it's due to any a desire to not do best practice, I think it's due to funding. If we were to be able to have fully accessible schools, and if we were able to have the full continuum in each school, we wouldn't have the need for students to be bused to other communities and other neighborhoods to be able to access their education. And like I said in the last meeting, applying a racial justice and equity lens to that as a person, as a white woman who fought hard to keep her daughter in a neighborhood school, and I was able to succeed at that. I serve many families who speak a language other than English, and families who have Black children that we are shipping out of their neighborhoods to other schools and out of their communities to receive special education services because either their neighborhood school doesn't have the continuum of service to support them, or their neighborhood school is not accessible. And that is doubly impacting. And I just don't feel that, I feel like with an investment like this, we can make such a big change in that piece of it around the students with disabilities and when that intersects with race. Thank you. So I would support that piece of making sure that each cluster has fully accessible schools so that they don't have to leave their communities.
Thank you for lifting that up, Noelle, and right with the impact of needing to of transportation, right? When that's not happening in our cluster offering schools, and so for folks who are processing their the feeder pattern is something that we might say, and it's the school that's associated with where you live and the pathway that you take to a high school starting from the beginning. So making sure that each one of those, at least in your neighborhood, right, have what you need. What are reactions other folks have to these kinds of investments resonate with the kinds of things their school needs?
Shanice, could you summarize some of the comments you heard in the first two sessions?
Absolutely, yeah. So we talked a little bit about the idea, and Patrick was also with us talking a little bit about these nuances, but the modernization of high schools will really have a lot of these investments that we're talking about in health and safety. And so there's discussion about the levels that were identified for masonry being conservative, and what that might look like in the context of a long-term plan, if they might be supported with other kinds of projects. And I think another higher level thing was more articulating that the ADA investments are a priority, and that those things have a great impact for students. And so the levels in which folks might see in each of the bond options, we're kind of processing what it might look like to think about ADA accessibility differently. So that's, I think, some highlights from our breakout groups.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to Shanice's comments, Director Bailey, we also talked a little bit about seismic upgrades to some of the buildings, and there were some questions around what might be included in the 15 million, and then the great need we have seismically throughout the district. That was also talked about.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm a new parent. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I guess I was just wondering, I noticed there was a lot of money dedicated to security, like you said, locks on doors. I guess I'm wondering if there is an issue, like what problem is that mitigating? I guess I don't quite understand like what that chunk of money would be going, like what solutions would that, or problems would that be trying to solve, I guess.
I'll take a stab at answering this question. It's not my area of expertise, but I'll give it a shot. I believe it centers around having locks on doors. So in the case of, it's more security related. So in the case of, say, a lockdown scenario and the teacher of a classroom needs to close her door and lock it, currently many classrooms have a keyed lock. So there's really no way to quickly lock your door without a key. This would replace that lock set with a push button on the inside of the classroom so that you can lock the door quickly and be secure in a lockdown scenario. And also, it might take into account converting some of our door hardware to levers to meet ADA requirements. We have a lot of just doorknobs in our classrooms and buildings. Hopefully that helped, and hopefully I'm not completely off on that answer.
I'll add just a little bit in that sometimes some of our locks actually require the staff member to go outside of the classroom to lock it with the key on the outside. So that's when you have a lockdown, that's the last thing you want to do, is go outside of the classroom. So it's really it's a significant safety concern, and the ADA handles is also of great benefit to improving all of our facilities.
And I believe there's some lights and video cameras involved in that.
Yes.
For example, I know regular portables have been vandalized a number of times in past years, and they didn't have any video camera up, so it was repeated vandalizations. And yes, my wife is a high school teacher, and her door is exactly like that. There's no way for her to get it locked in any kind of safe way if there was some kind of emergency. It makes me really sad to talk about this. I toured schools in Finland where they are designed to be open to the community, and we have to design our schools with all the gun dangers to be, quote, secure, and it's not as welcoming an entrance as we could have to our schools.
Thanks, guys. I have one more question. It's kind of unrelated also. I was wondering if there was consideration for kind of adding like health centers or healthcare professionals into the schools, so there's kind of increased access to healthcare and mental health services in this portion of the bond because it's under health and safety, or if that's maybe under another part.
I'll share really briefly, and maybe Claire or Patrick can hop in. What I will say is something that we're processing, especially with the Benson option, is having a campus that would really support the diverse and specific needs of students, and really having kind of wraparound services all centralized, and what we might see in our education investments might also impact our students in different ways, like social and emotional kind of core curricular investments, in addition to what special education specific infrastructure might look like. But yeah, I think there is definitely space to hear and or capture more perspective or insight on what these could look like for your school community, and if Claire or Patrick would add anything to what I shared.
Shanice, I don't have anything to add to that. We don't have anything specific under health and safety, physical improvements on the health centers or things like that. But I think you hit it really well.
So our high schools are designed to have a health center. We don't have the funds to provide more than I think it's a shared school nurse in many schools. In the past, the county supplied staffing for those health centers. They've been cutting that back and shifting it to more lower income high schools in East County. And in our, again, crazy healthcare system, it's hard to get a private sector provider to come in and staff those clinics. So I believe the new Grant High School has room, but we haven't found a provider yet. Lincoln, we had a big debate about whether to include space, because space is precious in designing a new high school. And again, getting a provider to actually provide services, and those are really important services for our students, has been really tough. And again, it's the crazy thing where we don't have a guaranteed accessible to all healthcare system in this country like most of the rest of the world does. But that's just where we are. We can only hope that sometime in the future we have that, and that we will have on-site services for at least all our high school students. So great questions that you've been asking.
Thank you.
So we have about 9 minutes left, and I know folks have participated in a couple other groups, and appreciate you all for joining this one to share perspectives on health and safety. And I know we might have a couple people who might haven't had a chance to share just reactions or anything you're sitting with, and so want to hold some space for that. And just anyone who's sitting with any questions as we are transitioning, and know there's opportunities to engage with us beyond tonight. The school bond at PPS email is a way to connect with us. We have a survey that is open as well, and they're engaging in focus groups in the next couple of weeks. And if you have any questions that come up later, there's space for that.
And always feel free to contact board members.
I do have a question. I'm wondering, my name is Tamara Hickok with Self-Enhancement. So wondering if how student voice and their perspective is going to be considered if the focus groups are scheduled to be right around July 7th, and the voting for a lot of these things is going to be happening July 28th. So I want to know, how are you guys plan to incorporate the student voice in things about safety, what they feel makes them safe, about the bond measures, about how to have an impact on their education and curriculum? How is their voice going to be heard within that, and then a part of your voting process in that 2.5 week gap?
Thank you for that question. How students, especially our Black and Native students, are expressing their suggestions and feedback on these options is a priority for us. And I know we are in the process of making outreach to groups and principals, but particularly calling out some specific space for Black and Native students. And so those spaces are in the works of being confirmed, but yeah, we're kind of in the middle of a holiday, if you will, and a lot of other things that are impacting our communities in ways that are really personal. So I think we have the capacity to engage with our partners especially folks who are serving the Jefferson community. And so I hope to also potentially, if this is of interest and or connected already, to engage with you in those. But student voice in more than one of those focus groups are for students. And then we have a student council who has a student rep who sits on our board of directors. And they will also have some space and have been engaging and giving feedback on the bond and previously. But that's how we're making sense of it now. But especially you all, the people who are closest and supporting our students every day, what that looks like to reach them. We absolutely have space to think about that. And the 9th is only the day where we're reviewing feedback. But we know that this is a continuous process, especially with our budget calendar and other large bodies of work that are connected to our school environments and the things invested there.
Thank you for that. So my follow-up question, you may have answered it, but I'm not sure. I mentioned in the first group I was in with the building modernization about the outreach, the true outreach being done. I'd like to start by applauding PPS by reaching out to some of their CBOs to get students of color and other students, just have student voice present during some of these conversations for the focus groups. But I would like to know if there's going to be another community outreach effort done in order to hear more community voices on behalf of these bond measures. Because as I said before, I was a part of what was supposed to have been a community outreach effort around the Jefferson concept. And there were, 20 people in the room. And when I think of the number of alumni, the number of current students, and the number of Jefferson supporters in and of themselves, the number goes well beyond 20. And many people said they just heard about it, they stumbled across the information. So my concern is, what all outreach are you guys going to do to receive the student voice?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are probably 6 different pathways that we're taking to engage students, elders in our Native and Black communities, and just general space for parents and Spanish-speaking folks, and a dedicated space we'll have for folks with different abilities or who are accessing special education. And I think those are just the focus groups, but we're definitely invested in thinking about those different mechanisms that look like this town hall tonight, and making outreach to our partners that both serve students and families. And so, yes, there might be some space for our district student council and our Black and Native students, but we're also engaging our families and communities and leaders. And so I think I would say we're in a process of probably confirming and making those connections with partners around the bond, but know that there are especially engagement opportunities around our decision making that inform the very investments we're talking about tonight that look like the bond, that look like the budget, that are in our ADA transition plan, for example, which will have some engagement in the next month. And so we're finding those conversations to be very, they're separate, but have some relationship. And I'm happy to take feedback and hear what other steps might be more helpful as we're making sense of the bond package, in addition to these other layers. But yes, I think that it's important to have more space outside of our student engagement, but the community more broadly, and especially our parents and partner organizations. I'm going to put my email in the chat, but I'm going to follow up with y'all as well to make sure you know what next steps look like, and especially if you want to continue to stay connected in the process.
Shanice, I have a question. I don't think that I kind of got what you said about how are we going to let the families know that there are discussions that they need to come to this or hear about this bond. I don't think I followed. You said a whole lot of stuff, but I don't think I heard that you said this is what we're going to do. You just kept saying about partners and yes, and I'm sorry. I don't get it.
Thank you for following up to clarify that. What we're trying to do is to connect with folks who have relationships and trust built with these communities that we're talking about. And so that might look like principals directly to connect with families and students. And it might look like connecting with some of those groups, but we absolutely have mechanisms like our emails and messaging, and might find that outside of the school communities where families and students might have relationships built with their principal, that having that outside relationship with partnerships. And then we have our communications through the district that is looking like sending surveys and emails and polls to folks to gain their perspective, and outside of some of these other ways that we might be reaching and having conversations.
So are you saying reaching people that have kids that are in Portland Public Schools with the email and communication? What about those that are in the community that don't have any children in Portland Public Schools, but they've gone to, like Tamara was saying, Jefferson, they've gone to Jefferson, you know, what about, how are you getting things to them?
Absolutely. I'd say our engagement, especially as we look at the time now up until November, is definitely very outward facing, and we might start with students and our families and folks who are close in these communities to think through what options might make sense and continue that conversation in a greater context. And so you might see things like mailers, especially going out to have continued engagement and feedback on these options we're grappling with, but ultimately that referral will be really informed by by the needs of students and families. And I'm not sure, Claire, if you would add anything to that, but there's absolutely continued, I'd say a continued timeline for engagement through the year, and we might be starting insular and then engaging our broader community the entire time, but that energy really goes, I think, more broadly as we talk about, as we talk to voters and engage the broader community in addition to our partners and students.
Okay, thank you.
The board does have additional engagement in public meetings and opportunities for public comment, and certainly we have more meetings specifically for the bond program as they're making a decision. So there are additional sessions that you can attend and let your thoughts be known. And if you have others that you'd like to come and join in the input, it would be most welcome.
And can I add this, Claire? I just noticed that David Main just joined our group, the bond communications person. David, I hate to put you on the spot, but Alicia had a question, and her question was centered around what if we have like a person that maybe went to Jefferson but doesn't have any kids? How are they going to find out about the bond outreach to bring in the community members to provide comments on things before the vote on the bond in July? And I hate to put you on the spot, David. Maybe you can answer, but maybe not. But I just thought I saw you. So.
We also have a polling going out too of community members where they'll be contacted at home and getting their opinions. So there's going to be, and those won't just, those will be, we're connecting with registered voters in those polls. So there are many ways, and you're right that the summertime is a hard time to connect, and COVID delayed this process 2 months. At the same time, if we wait, it's a whole nother year before we have to, where we can do projects. So it seems that we should be going forward because we have such great needs for our schools.
Hi, Patrick, it's David. Sorry, I put something in the chat, but there'll be links to the schedule for engagement meetings on the main PPS website once those are finalized.
I know we're a few minutes past time. They're really good questions, especially this last one. And I think it's a good one, especially we're in a space where we have the capacity to have conversations. So I think that those, the people who are calling out and the people involved raising their insight on these buildings will greatly inform our work. So I appreciate you all riding it out with us even past 8 o'clock. But right, these things are important and inform our day-to-day lives. And so we know just the thought partnership that you're giving us in this work will make the bond stronger. So appreciate you all tonight for being here. And you will be receiving follow-up information on next steps in the process. Lots of good links.
I added a website as well for people to. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, everybody.
I added a website for people to connect.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
David. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Janice, I got to start and end my day with you, girl. Best ever.
I know. That's
Mwah. We've been on this since 9 a.m. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janice, for running the session.